Hey guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today, we are discussing the importance of strength training when it comes to fat loss.
Yes.
So we've kind of touched on this a lot in bits and pieces.
I feel like we talk about it in most of our episodes, but we've never spent a whole podcast talking about why it's so important.
Right, so we're going to try to boil it all down, discuss why this is such an important recommendation, even when you're not necessarily worried about building muscle. So why would we ever start with strength training? Why do we incorporate that?
So most people, when we're trying to lose weight, right, are having in their mind that they want to burn as many calories as possible, right? And I feel like a lot of people are not super knowledgeable about how strength training can impact your overall metabolism or your overall calorie burn, right? So people who are so focused on this like calorie burn aspect are really missing the mark when they only focus on cardio because they think in their mind that cardio is going to burn more calories.
Right.
So strength training is putting a stress on your muscle, which increases your body's demand for energy to heal that muscle. So this is where things get a little bit tricky, but it's honestly pretty simple after we explain it. So this process doesn't just happen in the same amount of time that you do that workout. Right. This process is happening for an extended period of time after a strength training workout, right? Because you can't just heal a muscle right after you put stress on it.
Exactly.
It takes time. So that means that your calorie burn is elevated for an extended period of time. When you do cardio, you're basically limited to burning calories just within that period of time that you're on the treadmill or running or walking or whatever cardio exercise that you're doing.
Right. Steady state more specifically, but yeah.
Yes. So just to kind of generalize, for the most part, when you're doing cardio, you're only really burning calories during that cardio session. Whereas in a solid strength training session, you would be burning calories up to, what is the window? 48 hours
24
later?
24 to 48 hours, depending on, yeah. And that's really the same line of thought that HIIT training goes down too.
Yes.
So like HIIT training is much more similar to the effects of strength training than it is to other forms of cardio because of that factor. Because it's very easy to get in the mindset of, I want to lose all this weight. I know I need to burn a lot of calories. So I'm just going to get on this machine and watch the calorie number climb as I do a half hour, an hour, 2 hours of walking on the treadmill or elliptical or whatever it is. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But understanding the benefits of including the strength training for the additional caloric burn and the additional raised metabolism throughout the rest of the day is really beneficial and important. But that's only one of the factors, right? So obviously being able to burn more calories from strength training is great because we're trying to create a caloric deficit anytime we're trying to lose weight.
Definitely.
I would say the next big one is the secondary goal for anybody that does have a fat loss goal. And it might not be the first thing that you think about, but whenever you have a fat loss goal, your secondary goal is always maintaining your muscle mass.
Yes.
So all that we're trying to lose with a weight loss goal is body fat. Nobody wants to lose muscle mass. And so the best way to go about maintaining the muscle mass that's on your body is by doing exercise that requires that tissue. So strength training.
Because what happens if you don't use that tissue?
So
or don't stress
your body
that
will
tissue?
get rid of it.
Yes.
So your body is always trying to keep things as easy as possible. So if you don't give yourself a stimulus that requires that muscle tissue to be used, then when you start creating a caloric deficit, the first thing your body's going to get rid of is that excess muscle because the muscle is requiring more and more calories to stay active.
So it takes way more calories and energy to take care of muscle than it does to take care of fat.
Right.
So if you're never putting a stress on the muscle and demanding that the body use it, your body is going to see it as something that is unnecessary that it can get rid of.
Exactly.
So because it's harder to take care of, it's going to say, okay, well, you know, she's not using this this muscle anyway. We might as well, use some of this for energy, get rid of some of this to make her life easier. So I think the next thing is the thing that we've probably talked about the most, which is just the fact that especially as a beginner, when you're starting strength training, you can see a little bit of muscle growth, a little bit of new muscle growth, which will actually help you to burn more calories at rest. I think we've talked about that pretty many times before. Yeah. But just as a reminder, muscle tissue, like we just said, it burns more calories. It takes more calories to take care of. So if you're just at the beginning of your journey and your body is able to build a little bit more lean muscle as you start your strength training journey, you're going to be burning more calories at rest.
Yeah.
So this is separate from just like the metabolic effects of a strength training workout. This is just overall, even if you didn't work out for the day, if you have more muscle tissue on your body, you're naturally going to be burning more calories.
Right. And anytime we're talking about fat loss, caloric deficit, we're trying to do we really want to bring in every trick possible. So the less you have to do actively, the easier things are. Yeah. And so that's why it's so much easier for people that have large amounts of muscle mass to get in shape, is because and this kind of touches on the diet side of things too, their resting metabolism is so much higher, and they're able to consume so much more food to maintain their weight due to that large amount of muscle tissue that they have on their frame, so that when they're starting to try to lean out, their calories are still pretty high. Like, they're obviously still having to create a deficit, but if you're able to maintain your weight at 3,000 calories a day and then start losing weight at 2,700 versus somebody that's maintaining at 1,500 and losing at 1,200, that's a lot harder to maintain for a long period of time.
Oh, definitely. Well, and I think that's also the reason that some people who are a lot leaner can get away with doing less cardio, because again, they don't need to expend those extra calories because their high amount of muscle tissue is doing that for them. Not completely, and obviously that's still an important part of any fat loss protocol, but I think you see people who are leaner having to do less cardio to maintain or to start a weight loss phase.
Right. And so muscle tissue is really the thing we're trying to keep a hold of the entire time. So when you're doing, kind of circling back to the cardio side of things, anytime you're doing a bunch of steady state cardio, your body is eventually going to adapt to that. So you're going to start seeing less and less calories being burned from the same exact activity that you've been repeating time in, time out. Now, this isn't going to change on the piece of cardio equipment that you're doing this on. So the treadmill is still going to say you burned the same amount of calories, but your body isn't. And so if you've got no strength training included in your overall plan, then you've got no way to mitigate that change happening. And since we have already discussed that muscle tissue without strength training is not going to stay on your body, if you're just doing steady state cardio, then your body's going to not only get rid of that, but it's going to get it adapted to the steady state cardio, burn less calories from that, and burn
a higher percentage of muscle tissue versus
fat. And so then you've actually got two different ways that you're burning less calories.
It's then working against you versus working for you.
And that's where we see people run into that rut of, I was doing an hour a day on the treadmill and I was losing all this weight, and then I started doing it again maybe like a year later, saw some progress, and then totally stalled out. Or sometimes you even see people start gaining weight while they're doing that activity.
So adapted to the cardio. And I think you can bring variety, or I guess a lot more variety if you're doing strength training. There are so many different ways that you can add variety and add intensity versus cardio, because more than likely your cardio, there's not a ton of ways to change it up. There definitely are, but let's be honest, you're probably not going in every day and doing like a different style cardio workout.
Right.
But I think that it can probably even be a little bit more fun too when you add strength training in and you try to get more variety that way. So with building muscle and kind of having these like beginner gains for some people. Is that something I should be worried about? Like if I'm trying to lose weight, I mean, do I really want to be doing strength training and then like I'm just going to be bulkier, right?
No, not at all. So with these two processes that are happening, building muscle versus losing body fat, you will never be able to outpace fat loss with muscle building. It's simply impossible. So there will never be a point where, especially if you're dieting properly and you've established a caloric deficit, where if you start implementing strength training, that suddenly you'll gain all this weight and this bulk and whatever else. And it's definitely more of a fear of a lot of women that haven't done any strength training.
I've gotten this question a lot this week, especially. And it's a little frustrating sometimes because it's like there are people who try so hard to build muscle. It's not that easy.
No, it's not easy at all.
And, especially if you're on a weight loss protocol, a fat loss diet, a fat loss nutrition plan, you're not being given enough calories to build significant muscle.
Right.
So even if you are a brand new, person to strength training, even if you were to see a little bit of muscle gain, like you're not all of a sudden going to be like building thickness and getting super bulky.
Well, and the muscle gain wouldn't even come with any sort of real weight gain unless you weren't in a caloric
for those beginners, like
deficit.
Yeah, so for those beginners, you see a lot more body composition changes happening and not necessarily like you're gaining muscle first and you're not losing any of the fat. Like that's not really what happens.
Yeah, and just the fact that you're touching a weight doesn't mean that your muscles grow.
No.
Like now, sure.
Even if you think you put on muscle easily, and I'm not doubting it, some people do. But again, if you don't have the energy and materials to actually build muscle tissue, your body can't build muscle tissue.
And I've got a secret for you. For everybody out there that thinks they build muscle really easily, you're wrong.
You're probably wrong.
Sorry to break that to you, but I promise you, I've never met a single person in my life that's built muscle too quickly. That's not an issue.
And the other thing is, like,
it's not.
These people are usually coming in saying, oh, I gain muscle really easily. It's happened to me in the past, but let this just be a reminder. If that happened to you in the past and you weren't following a really good nutrition plan, that might be the other side of that. Yeah. So if you're following a well-planned diet and doing strength training, you're not going to all of a sudden be bulky.
I think a lot of the times it can also be this idea that's put in someone's head by maybe they're working with a trainer and they're not seeing weight loss. So the trainer's like, oh, you're building all this muscle. And then suddenly the client thinks, oh, I build muscle so quickly that I can't lose weight. I promise you that's not happening because it's physically impossible. It's literally not possible. It takes
so much energy, so many calories, so much protein, and so much stimulus and stress on the muscle to build muscle.
Right. Beyond like your first year or two strength training, and sure, that is a lot of people when they're first starting out, but beyond those first couple of years, guys that are trying to build muscle as much as possible see really successful years as being years that they gained 5 pounds of lean mass.
Yeah.
5 pounds in 365 days. So don't try to tell me that you worked out twice last week and you put on 2 pounds of muscle because it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. I think, we've also talked about this before. If you saw an increase in weight or, felt bulkier after starting a strength training routine, it may also just be the fact that your body hasn't adjusted to it yet and you've got some inflammation and some water retention happening. That can be true too. So again, if you only gave it a week or two and you're like, oh no, this is making me too bulky. I'm just like,
so much
I'm gaining so much muscle in these 2 weeks. Which, again, with women, I feel like I see frequently. They try something for 2 weeks and they get
misinformation out there. I'm not blaming you. No, that's what you thought.
Yeah, this is no one's fault.
Right.
It's just you have to put it in perspective. That's why we're trying to educate you a little bit more. Yeah. It's just not physically possible. Yeah. So don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Use it. It's a tool, and you will see so much more success if you utilize strength training. Not to say that you can't lose weight without it, but you won't have the shape that you want if you never do any resistance training.
Right.
You'll just be a smaller, softer version of yourself.
Exactly. And now, one final thing I want to touch on, unless we come up with something else in the meantime, is really optimizing fat loss. So this whole time we've kind of talked about caloric deficit and maintaining muscle mass, losing body fat. But when it comes down to really optimizing fat loss, the key component of that is doing an activity that is being fueled by the stored body fat that you have. And the best way to target stored body fat with activity is doing cardio after a strength training session. And so the reason for that is strength training is a very explosive style of movement. So anytime you're doing fast bursts of movement, whether that's a sprint or a set of 10 reps on bench press, whatever it may be, short duration stuff, your body's going to use carbohydrates, fastest fuel. And so it's going to tap into stored carbs first. When you do strength training first in your workout, if you're able to burn through all of your body's stored glycogen, and it does take a while to deplete that, we're talking about days of consistent strength training with monitored amounts of carbs, then if you do that first and you burn through those stored glycogen or the glycogen storages, then the only fuel that you have left is stored body fat for your cardio. And so that's where mixing in the steady state cardio after a tough strength training session is so beneficial, because not only have you burned through that stored glycogen, but now if you are doing heart rate specific steady state cardio, you can stay in the fat burning range, quote unquote, and really take advantage of tapping into those fat storages more so than if you were to just do the cardio on its own.
Yes, because fat takes a little bit longer for the body to actually turn into energy, meaning your body can break into those fat stores at lower intensity exercises. So what Kyle's saying is, heart rate training, targeting lower intensity, not like rested state, obviously,
right,
but not being, gasping for air, not doing sprints, not being in the middle of a weight training set. Your body needs time to actually break into those fat stores, which is why it's great to be doing the cardio to burn through more fat, while resistance training is something that requires more instant energy, like he said, meaning your body's using glucose. Glucose is your instant energy source. Just to clarify that a little bit.
And speaking of glucose, this is going a little further with, like, if you're talking about somebody that has problems with their blood sugars, strength training is amazing because it's one of the few exercises that you can do that actually clears blood glucose in the absence of insulin, meaning that you don't need to be consuming carbohydrates or anything else to get your body to flush that blood glucose into the cells, because the activity
it's placing a higher demand for glucose.
Right. So it's going to suck that energy into the muscle tissue without any other assistance.
Yeah. So lower intensity and things like walking, can be good to a certain extent, but we just said, you're burning a higher percentage of fat at lower intensity exercises. So while that's still good for blood sugar, it's definitely not as good as something like weight training or resistance training, even body weight style training for people who are, not as seasoned.
Right. So they all have their merits, and that's the reason why the proper combination of all of them is what gets you the best results. It gets you the fastest results. It keeps the lean tissue on your body, gives you the shape that you want ultimately, keeps your metabolism up, allows you to eat more while losing body fat.
Which I still don't understand why people don't want to eat more food while losing weight.
If that's not the single best reason to do it, I don't know what is. And yeah, it's just having the proper combination of all three is the best way to do it long-term for success. And there is really no question about it.
100%. 100%. You need to do strength training. Any body type can benefit.
And you're not going to build muscle.
And you're not going to just completely bulk up. I don't care how well you think you build muscle. You're not going to bulk up.
Yeah. Spend some time in a laboratory if that's the case, because I'm sure there are plenty of
we
scientists.
We would all love the secret.
That would love.
Kyle would especially love this secret.
Absolutely. So thank you guys for tuning in this week. If you've got any topics in particular you'd like us to cover in the future, feel free to reach out to myself at hypertrofit.com. You can find Alexa at therootedrd.com, and we will see you guys again next week.
We'll see you guys next week.